Hi, folks. I wanted to reshare a really unique episode. A while back, an incredible Dragonfly student, Aimee Kemp, asked if she could flip the script and interview me for one of her courses. We ended up having a fantastic conversation about my own research in urban ecology and pollinator conservation. There's so much interest right now, both within Dragonfly and the broader conservation world, about the critical role of pollinators and the unexpected benefits of connecting with nature inside cities like Chicago and New York. I think this conversation really gets to the heart of those issues, and it's a great example of the kind of student-led projects we'd love to share. So please enjoy this flipped episode with Aimee Kemp and myself.
All right, so hi everybody. I'm here today with Kevin Matteson. He is an urban ecologist, pollinator biologist, advisor, and professor at Miami University's Project Dragonfly program. So I guess to start out, what inspired you to become involved in ecology and conservation and pollinator biology?
Well, I guess the very beginnings for me were camping trips with my family as a kid. So I grew up in New York City, first in the Bronx and then New Rochelle, New York. And the Bronx certainly is pretty urban. The New Rochelle also is a big city, suburb. It's not too many places where you can go and disappear into the woods, or even really see the stars very clearly. So these trips my family would take up to the Catskills, camping in the summer, were just this incredible sort of eye-opening, literally, figuratively, moments for myself to see stars, see the Milky Way, and also what I remember is smelling fresh air and just being like just the smell of the woods. Of course, also like seeing frogs and newts and swimming in a pond and just sort of seeing life all around you. So I just feel like that sort of disparity and that contrast between where we were living and where we would go for like 1 or 2 weeks each summer kind of gave me this sense of the magic of nature and also the scarcity of nature, that it's not in every place. So I'd say those were the beginnings for me, my passion for these things.
Okay, and since you're also an urban ecologist, can you maybe explain a little bit about what that means? I don't think people, when they're in places like New York City or any big city in general, they might not realize how much nature is actually there.
Urban ecology, I mean, it sounds almost like a contradiction, right? Because so much of the way we think of nature is that it's separate from cities. But just like you said, cities actually have these large green spaces that you can go into and have that sense of wonder and connection. Although it really depends where you're living and what type of urban setting you're in, and whether that city park feels safe to you or not. And also, a lot of those are pretty heavily manicured and managed such that, it's not going to have that wildness that you might find other places. But I think for me, urban ecology is it's a really growing area of study because more and more people in the world are living in cities. So a lot of people have heard the stat that, I think it was sometime in the last 10 years or so, more of humanity lives in cities, in urban areas, than in rural. And that's actually the first time in the history of humans on Earth that has been the case. Humans have often lived more rural and in sort of agricultural matrix kind of settings. And that's only going to keep increasing. All the projections for the next like few decades are all pretty much all human population growth in the world is going to be absorbed by cities. So we really got to think about how we make cities livable and make it a place that humans can feel comfortable, and they can connect with nature. And if we can do that, we'll be in a good shape for conservation.
And now that you've brought up conservation, how would you say that you're like going right through my list here? How would you say that urban ecology is related to conservation?
Well, like I said, I mean, more and more people are living there. So the next generation of leaders in conservation, there's a good probability they're going to grow up in a city already. I mean, I think like with the Dragonfly community, whenever I ask around in classes, where do people live? I mean, most people associate with a city or an urban area. So we need to think about, there's this whole thing. It's one idea is that it's called the Pigeon Paradox, which is like, if you have all these people living in cities and all they interact with are pigeons and other sort of species that are considered like, I personally love pigeons, but it's many people think of them as sort of dirty or like sky rats and things like that. So that people may not appreciate nature, right? And that's also been termed the extinction of experience or extinction of ecological experience by some writers, and of course, Last Child in the Woods by Richard Louv, and the whole nature, the idea that like kids are not experiencing nature both because they're living in cities, but also because of media, cell phones, addiction to screens, all of those things. So there's a lot of different forces at play that are making those direct nature experiences less likely for people. So anyway, so that's a lot of what motivates me to think about conservation in urban settings, is so people can have those experiences and kind of be exposed to these ideas.
I run a young naturalist club after school, and I work in Coney Island in the middle of Brooklyn. And yesterday I had the kids out there, and there were some bumblebees out, and there were butterflies and ladybugs, and the kids were like so surprised that those things were there. They're like, we're in a like a grass patch next to the school that has a few dandelions and some other random plants, and these things are here. And I'm like, yeah, they are. They were pretty excited to see them. So those those experiences with urban wildlife are very important to especially kids, I think, that grow
Well,
up.
totally. It's like a lesson in resilience in nature, right? That it's amazing what nature can do. And Ian Malcolm from Jurassic Park character would say like nature finds a way or life finds a way, I think is the quote. And it's true. Life does find a way, and it's pretty magnificent when you see that. It's not to say then that like, oh, everything's going to be fine, because of course it's not. Not every species is like these ones that can thrive in cities. But I think for kids growing up in cities too, it's also like a really nice analogy and or a metaphor for their lives too, right? Like if these species can exist here and thrive, I can too, right? This maybe isn't this inhospitable or difficult landscape, right? And all that depends. How safe do you feel and how comfortable are you in all sorts of settings, your family setting. I mean, this could get into sociology, but I think like it's just an interesting teaching moment when you see a butterfly flitting through a very urban area and you're like, huh, look at that.
Yeah. So I know that pollinators are also a big part of the research that you've done. You've done a lot of studies on bees in urban settings. What are some things that you would say people can do to, or maybe what are some issues that are facing urban pollinators or like pollinators that can be found in urban settings in general?
Well, I think the main thing at face value is like the amount of concrete and the floral resources that may or may not be there. Fortunately, I mean, humans often do like flowers as well, and city parks, gardens, and such are in some ways they mimic the early successional habitats that many bees and other pollinators likely have always been evolved to exploit. So if New York City used to be primarily forest, deciduous forest, maybe some wetlands mixed in there, and mature deciduous forest, while there may be some pollinators that could require that, quite a few are not going to do very well in that kind of shaded tall tree environment. So I think actually the disturbances in urban areas and those gardens can be quite a good opportunity for them.
Are you raising your hand? What are you raising your hand for?
What's behind you?
Oh, that's my screensaver in Zoom, but it's the Northern Lights. I don't know if you have ever heard of that,
I have.
but yeah, it's a really cool natural phenomenon. It actually looks like that.
How does it form?
That's a question you can ask in a little bit. Okay.
I'm hungry.
Okay. Can you go get a snack, please? Thank you. Anyway.
Real life will find a way.
Real life, yeah. Okay. So there are a lot of people right now that are advocating for like rewilding urban spaces, like adding more green space to urban spaces. Are some flowers better than others? Are some plants better than others? What would you say to that?
Yeah, I think there are some plants that are used in landscaping that are really selected for their bloom and their petals. And so they've like actually genetically alter them so they like, or they've bred them so that they will produce like 2 or 3 times the amount of petals, which makes them showier. They've also been selected for large flower size in many cases. Anyway, if they have more petals, they're showier, but the problem is the nectaries and the pollen becomes less accessible to pollinators or even completely inaccessible. So that's a big problem. So certain things like impatiens are one that, and also like those are shade tolerant plants. So they're often used in street trees, like around a street tree, you might see them and they're all blooming. They look very pretty, but if you look closely, you probably aren't going to see a ton of flower visiting insects there. So beyond that, I think some plants that are not native and are common garden varieties can still attract a lot of bees. And in fact, like if they're selected for long bloom time or large flower size, sometimes that does correlate with more nectar and pollen. So it can go, this issue can go both ways. They can be selected in a way that makes them sort of super for excellent for pollinators, and they can be selected in a way that makes them awful. So I think of it as a bimodal distribution on the non-native and cultivar varieties that are in the big box stores. So you kind of got to know and observe and look at what is happening in your yard, or maybe check web resources to kind of decide, am I going to go with this or not?
Okay, so basically see what works for the pollinators that are in your area. And you're saying that non-native is okay as long as it has a certain floral structure.
Yeah, especially in urban areas. And if you know it's not invasive or in that setting, it's unlikely to be invasive, right? So, for instance, the example I always give is butterfly bush in New York City community gardens. It's from Asia originally. It can be invasive in some parts of the US, but in New York City community gardens, it's not going to spread anywhere, right? It doesn't really have really anywhere to go. I know we need to be careful about these things, but the reality is butterfly bush is pulling in monarchs and really cool butterflies, sulfurs, painted ladies, red admirals, all these things. It's just a butterfly magnet. So it's a very simple thing people can do to actually promote some local biodiversity. And it's really hard to say no to that. You know, have a dogmatic blanket, no, I'm never going to put that into that setting, especially when New York City, for example, and other cities are so altered already. It's very hard to think we can go back to this pristine state or perceived pristine state where everything is native. So we kind of have a new world we're living in, and I think we have to do the best we can with all that is available to us.
Yeah, that's a really interesting point. I myself have a butterfly bush in my yard, but I also don't have a connection to any forest area or anything. And I get lots of butterflies on it every year. So yeah.
Yeah, yeah,
Interesting to think about it in terms of, because everything's so fragmented.
Right.
If you do have something that may not be great in a setting where it could spread, then I can see that. Because I mean, Tree of Heaven is an example. That's a tree that's all over New York City because it was a great street tree, right? So as long as it doesn't get out into the ecosystem, then yes, it's okay. But
yeah, and I get why everyone's leery of that, because we've screwed up with a number of species that you're like, it'll be fine. And then next thing you know, honeysuckle all over the Midwest, and I see that,
yeah.
and it's a non-native, of course, understory shrub, and
Mhm.
it's funny, like a lot of pollinators go to it and a lot of birds go to it, but it's wiping out the understory ephemerals and
Mhm.
even the next generation of oak trees. So it is a big problem, and we do need to be careful. But I also think like context is everything. Like you said, you really got to evaluate the context in which you're working. And like there are a lot of people in gardens and parks and cities and places where they want to grow some really cool thing, like a rose bush or something,
Mhm.
right? Or even like if you want to have an herb garden, right? A lot of those herbs are technically not native, oregano, basil, things like that. but they have a cultural tie-in or a culinary and cultural tie-in, and they're amazing for a lot of bees. So,
Mm-hmm.
um, again, I think you just got to think about what are you trying to do with your space, and how can you achieve that?
And so, like, doing some research beforehand would be something that you would advise too.
Yeah, and reflecting on what you're trying to achieve, right?
Mhm.
Because the other thing is like where I'm a big fan of sort of a more pure native plant option is if you're really thinking about like Lepidoptera and host plants for moths and things like
Mhm.
that, things that need, phytophagous insects. So so those really, and that's a lot of Doug Tallamy's work and others, like really do have a tighter coevolutionary tie-in with the host plant and the insect feeding on it, right? Whereas many bees, and like when you're feeding on nectar and pollen, there are some specialist bees. There are ones that require specific pollen and only go to those plants. But a lot of bee species are generalists. They will go to any, and they can adapt and they can use a variety that is technically from Europe, but is related to the one they used to
Mhm.
here. So it's not, in my mind, it's not as tight of a coevolutionary framework. So again, it depends, what are you managing for species diversity? Are you managing for cultural use or pure aesthetic kind of thing? So yeah, I would encourage people to do research, like you said, but also to really reflect on their goals and their primary interests of the community they're in.
How does someone start? Like, where do they, okay, so they've done their research. Where do they find the things that they're trying to put into their green space? Like, where's the best place to go? Is there a best place to go?
Well, there's a million resources online. Like Xerxes Society, of course, is great for insects and pollinator guides, and there's lots of other websites if you do a Google search. But they'll kind of give you the same lists. It'll be a lot of things like, yeah, echinacea, purple coneflower, and bee balm, and all these sort of herbaceous perennial plants that are wonderful, but they take a while to get established, and they can start to sort of be locally invasive, like within your yard. So they can get a little leggy and unruly. And the thing I think people don't always understand is like trees are actually awesome for bees too. So
Mm.
like right now, redbud is blooming right outside my house where I live here in Ohio. And it is, you look at a redbud tree blooming, you're like, that is the most
It's
beautiful blooms. And you're like,
beautiful.
there's nothing, you see, like there's not much activity, and then you go closer and you go closer and you start to notice there are dozens of insects utilizing it. And so, and even maple, which maple is largely wind
Mm.
pollinated, but many insects use maple pollen, nevertheless they feed on it. So even though from the maple's perspective it's probably going to be okay in terms of pollination, even if it doesn't get an insect visitor,
Mm.
for the bees, it's like, here's an extra food source. So it's quite useful. So I would say, don't forget about the trees. And the other thing I would say is walk around your neighborhood block, wherever you live, and just start to observe and notice. And if you see something that's covered, ask your neighbor, like, what is that plant? And learn that way, not just from the web search that we all go to, but from actual looking out in your area.
Yeah, I think observation is really, really important. And you see, okay, this species is attracted to this specific thing. I want that species to come to my yard. What is this thing that I am looking at? And you can use an app like iNaturalist or Leaf Snap or PlantNet and try to identify whatever it is you see that these pollinators are attracted to, and then go from there. So yeah, there's so many really, really great apps that we could use now as guides. You can use field guides too.
I was just literally out with my wife yesterday and we were on a walk, and I used like this plant ID app, and just for some of these ephemerals that I was like, oh wow, that's a trout lily or whatever. And the other thing I've noticed is our lawn is a weedy mess, but I actually think it's beautiful. And my wife kind of helped me see it this way, because I think it has all these actual non-native plants that come up, like violets, but naturalized non-natives, right?
Mhm.
And then plantain and dandelion. And a lot of lawn owners, if you're like have to have the perfect lawn, you're going to hit it with herbicides, which is
Mhm.
an unfortunate thing in my mind to do, right? Because you're putting a toxin into the environment and you're reducing the flowering resources for lots of insects. And the other thing that happens right now around April is everyone gets excited to mow their lawn. They're like, oh, it's beautiful out. I'm going to do some lawn work. But I have had to try and say to myself, you know what? Give it a couple weeks. Let some of it's taller over here, some of it's, and there's a temptation to make it all uniform, but there's so much activity on our lawn right now with bees and
Mhm.
butterflies that we're just going to leave it for a while longer. So,
I currently have a bunch of sticks,
okay.
which my husband keeps asking me when I'm going to trim them. But I have a bunch of sticks on my perennials that I left over winter because I know some bees and other insects like to live in them over the winter. So I went on Xerxes Society and they're like, try to keep them as long as you can until it's consistently above 50 degrees. And I was like, okay, the sticks will stay.
It's
um,
hard because when we get into it, we want to tidy, right? It gives us a sense of control and it's a physical outlet. And it's hard to stop sometimes, just like
mhm.
if you start vacuuming in your house and you just get in that zone. But I think restraint when it comes to gardening is really important. I pride myself, I haven't ever thrown away yard trimmings or
Mhm.
debris. And I'm fortunate in that we have like, it's not a huge yard, but it's enough that there are corners of the yard I can use for my leaf piles and things. And I kind of rotate them so the soil is enriched. But also, it's not just for the bees, it's also for all the decomposers and
Mhm.
all sorts of things that'll use it as shelter or break it down, fungi and things like that. So I think it really does add to the biodiversity of the whole yard when you leave things out like that.
Mhm. Aside from adding like plants that attract pollinators to your yard, you've listed that we can leave the leaves. We can leave our yard a little bit wilder and not cut back our lawn immediately or maybe as short, and we can leave the sticks around for a little bit longer. I know that a lot of bees specifically, and there are a lot of other insects that overwinter or live in the soil. Can you talk a little bit about what gardeners can do to let the creatures that live in the soil have a little better chance at hanging
Yeah,
around?
some research has shown they don't love mulch. Mulch is a big deterrent. So while it's tempting to lay down mulch to prevent weeds from coming up and give that sense of order to your garden, if you can avoid it, the ground nesting bees will be thankful that you did that. So I think that's a good one. Also, if you have any sort of like slopes and areas where there's a bare patch of earth and you might be like, oh, I got to change that, but observe it for a little bit. It may actually be an important area for ground nesting bees. And again, this is different than ground nesting hornets or wasps that people think of as a major nuisance. The bees are going to be solitary female provisioning for a few larvae and young for the next year, and they're not aggressive at all. So it again comes back to just observing what's in your yard. I also think water features, if you if you can, but I know that's a bit of work, a little pond or an area, because I've seen some interesting solitary wasps come and gather water and mud from the edge of a pond, and they use it in constructing their nests. And some bees will do that
Mhm.
as well, like mason bees. Um, so yeah, those are some options.
What about like turning the soil over? Like I see, I used to, before I knew all of these things, I used to use one of those garden weasels that you like turn in the soil to, oh, I have to aerate my soil. I don't use it anymore, but maybe you can explain why.
Well, I think, yeah, it can disturb those ground nests, like things like cellophane bees that I've seen that use friable or turned soil. If it's fairly well drained, they will set up residence there. So if you do turn the soil, not turning all of it, leaving some areas, observing. I think, some disturbance is a part of gardening, right? We are going to
Yeah.
be putting in a new bush or whatnot. And so I wouldn't say you can never do that. But if you're doing it at a big scale, just be aware that that may affect some of those ground nesting species in the area.
Yeah, that's really good to know. I guess moderation in what we do is always helpful.
Yeah, because I've seen it both. It's a weird thing. Like I've also seen it benefit some speed. Like I turned soil in an area, and then the next summer I saw a whole bunch of things emerging from that new
Huh,
area.
interesting.
So again, you
Observe.
moderation and observation.
Yes. I feel like yeah, I'm gonna definitely put that on the site here if that's all right. Kevin Matteson, moderation and observation. So I know that you are creator of BeQuest. I thought if you wanted to talk about BeQuest at all, maybe how did it start? Is there anything you want people to know about it? I had my students go through it, the ones in the after school club, and they really enjoyed it. It was a great like rainy day activity that we did after school one day. So go ahead.
Yeah, I'm so happy to hear that. I think so the impetus for that bequest, it's like a sort of gamified interactive, right? So that people can learn about bees. And I would say it's well, if you're new to it, you'll definitely learn something. And it's designed for all ages. But I'd say even if you're someone who's like a biology major in college and you've graduated or it's been a number of years, but you've studied, I think you still probably would learn a little bit from the bequest. And it can be completed in maybe like an hour or two or so. But the idea of making it like a game, so it's actually modeled after Stardew Valley, which is this a very well selling popular game that my daughter played when she was younger. It has like cute pixelated graphics, and you're like a farmer and you move around and you grow crops, and you also can go to dungeons and fight things. But I think a lot of environmental issues, they're kind of wrapped into the doom and gloom and the negativity of like, oh, like every nature documentary is like, it's so wonderful, it's so beautiful seeing these species. And then the last like 10 minutes is like, but they are disappearing. And it goes into that cycle, and you kind of just leave feeling down. So trying to make it a little more lighthearted by tying it to a video game vibe was the goal there. And yeah, it was really fun. I'm so glad your students did it. And I want to get the word out about it more. We actually want to develop one called Climate Quest on climate change issues that maybe will have like a look like Mrs. Pac-Man, Mrs.
Oh,
Pac-Man
wow.
from back in the day.
That
So
would be
we're
awesome.
working on that one.
Well, send it my way. I'll gladly like have my students, go through it. They really did enjoy the Bee Quest. I actually had some kids who are in my after school program and also in the classes I teach. And they were like, Ms. Kemp, when I finish this assignment, can I play Bee Quest? And I was like,
Oh my God.
okay.
Hey, that's the best compliment ever. Kids are tough. Like they've got so many options now of all these
Yes.
games that are addictive on their phones and whatnot. And
Yeah.
that's what we're competing with. So I mean, that's why you can't like think like, oh, they're gonna go read some, obviously like the attention span is so low, right? So it's like, how do you connect people and make it fun and make it more engaging? And I still think we have a ways to go on at that, but I think science in general and science communication, we just have to
Mhm.
keep working on that.
And that's one of the things we're learning in biology in the age of technology. So
For sure.
it's all full circle. So before we go, I have one last question for you, and that's, do you have a favorite pollinator? And if so, what is it?
For a while, I've been saying Bombus impatiens, and Bombus is the genus for bumblebees. Impatiens it's the common eastern bumblebee, and it's just these individuals are all over New York City and pretty much everywhere. I mean, they're in Ohio, I think pretty most locations like east of the Rockies or so. They're just a very common bumblebee. They can thrive in urban, suburban. You'll see them in some natural habitats too. And they are buzz pollinating our crops. They're just very active and cool looking fuzzy bumblebee that is doing a lot of pollination without much fanfare. Its common name is common eastern bumblebee, like it's in the name, but that's why I kind of love it too.
And is that the largest bumblebee in Eastern North America? Or is that like the one that we'd normally see? Like maybe the one that my son and I saw last week? Or
Well, when he said queen bee, right, and he was thinking
Mhm.
about queen bumblebee, good chances it's a common eastern bumblebee, a Bombus impatiens queen. But the biggest in size is the eastern carpenter bee, Zydecopa
Okay.
virginica. So those can be a bit bigger, but queens, I would say queen bumblebees can get pretty close to the size of adult carpenter bee.
Okay. This not 100% sure, but it's probably what we saw was the common Eastern bumblebee. But thank you so much for your time. And this was awesome.
This was so much fun. Hey there, folks. Just one more thing before you head out. If you have a moment, like, follow, share this podcast. It really helps get the word out about Project Dragonfly and hopeful conservation. And I would love to hear in what ways you are finding this podcast useful, how you listen, what you would like to hear more of, less of, etc. Please feel free to send me any and all feedback, any ideas for guests to Kevin Matteson at my email, which is mattiskc@miamioh.edu. That is spelled MATTESKC@miamioh.edu. Thanks again for listening and have a great day.